in this video, we're going to talk about, should you gray rock your narcissist? Now, if you are dealing with a narcissistic ex, you've probably heard this term. If you haven't heard it, it's a very common term that's used to talk about communicating with a narcissist. And I'm going to explain what that means. Don't forget to hit like on this video and also subscribe so you get notified as new videos are released. But let's dig into this gray rocking thing. I think one of the biggest things that happens with this is really that it's overused. So you can't just take something and apply it blindly to a situation. You have to really be able to look at the situation and analyze it and determine, is this appropriate use of this technique at this time? There are times when I've seen people not respond to a message or ignore in an effort to disengage, only to have the court turn around and say, you should have responded to that. And so these techniques can work against you in certain situations if you're not really paying attention. And this is why I think that the coaching becomes so important, because you don't know what you don't know. And you need somebody that does know what you don't know to help you figure this out. Because you can learn great techniques and things that are helpful, but again, you also need to know when to apply it. Here are kind of my rules, and some of these coincide with the gray rocking, but these are kind of the rules that I usually give clients who are dealing with any sort of high conflict ex, particularly narcissism, but sometimes that's borderline. Sometimes people that have severe bipolar and cycle will have high conflict personalities also. And so this is helpful in any of those situations. Now, the number one thing the court wants to see us do in communication is disengage from conflict. And I know that's hard to do because you've got somebody that's pushing your emotional buttons, and it's very easy to be reactive to them because that's sort of the behavior pattern that you've established. But it's real important that you kind of draw a line in the sand and determine that you have a new communication style, a new way of dealing with this person moving forward. And that number one rule is to disengage from conflict. The second thing I always tell people, and this one sort of is hard sometimes, and that is be kind. Now, I know what you're thinking. Tammy, why do I have to be kind to somebody that's being jerky to me, right? But here's the thing. You don't want to come off as the difficult one. And I'm not saying be overly kind or, try to have some kind of emotional connection in your communication or anything of that nature. I'm just saying be kind and courteous just as you would to a new acquaintance that you met or a business connection that you're dealing with. Just that general common courtesy. In other words, don't let your emotions cause you to sink into being rude, being attacking, overly sharing your emotions about a situation. You don't want to go into that side of it. And so that's really what the be kind means. It means sort of keep it on this higher level business type where you're being courteous, but you're exchanging the necessary information and nothing really beyond that necessary information. The third thing that I always say is no emotions. Now, this one's tricky because I find that a lot of times people don't think they're sharing emotions when actually they are. I've had clients say to me things like, well, I'm just stating what the truth is. They're stating something that's not true, and I'm just stating what the truth is. But if the truth that you're stating isn't in regards to actually solving the problem that's at hand, in other words, if you're just engaging in argument with that person and you're going back and forth in your positions and your arguments, then you are sharing on an emotional level. If you say, I think we should do this, I think we shouldn't do that, sometimes those types of things, even in regard to the children, really are more emotion based. Okay. So we want to stay really focused on just problem solving. Let's say that we're talking about, where the child's going to go to school in the fall. I mean, that's a common thing that parents have a hard time with when the children start school. And so if you're going to talk about school, maybe you would say, well, I think that this school would be good because, it's right in between our two houses, has a really good academic record, all of these things. And if the other person says, no, I want them to go to this school because this is, right next to my house and I'm the one that works and I work a regular job and you have flexible hours. And so you should be the one to, you know, come to me when it's time to pick up the child and, things of that nature. Then I think it's okay to kind of go back and restate, look, and one of the things you always want to do is acknowledge the other person's feelings about it, right? Look, I understand that this would make it convenient for you and there are some benefits to that school, but I think this school is really the best choice because, whatever your reasons are, because of its academic record, because a lot of the kids in, the area go to this school, because certain friends the child has go to this school. And then if you still don't agree, recognize that you're not going to agree and then make a decision of whether this is worth filing a court motion over or whether you want to just give in. And I also find that sometimes if you can just wait, just don't feel like you've got to push the issue this very moment, just wait and give it a couple days and give the person some time to respond, because especially with high conflict personalities, they want to feel like they're in control. And so the more that you're shoving an idea down their throat, the more resistant to it they're going to be. But if you kind of float your ideas out there and then you just leave it and let it become almost like they're the ones that decided that this was okay, which a lot of times I find they will do if you can back off long enough, but we're fearful and we're afraid we're not going to get the outcome we want and we're trying to control the situation. And so we really want to push our own agenda. And if you can just kind of take that deep breath and wait and give it some space, I find a lot of times it will work itself out. And if it doesn't, like I said, and it's a big enough issue, like a school thing or something of that nature, then you decide if you really want to file in court or potentially go to mediation. I find those types of issues lend themselves to mediation very, very well. And a lot of times people think if they're dealing with a high conflict personality that they can't mediate. But honestly, to me, that's the very person that you want to get into mediation, because I feel like their ability to manipulate and use their charisma and their talk is more effective in a court setting. It doesn't really work as well in like a private mediated setting. So if you haven't tried mediation, I would highly recommend that you do that. It's much more economical usually. And it also most of the time will give you a better result with a lot less stress. So if you haven't tried that, try it. Number 4, answer only the question that's in the message that you receive. So if you don't receive a question in the message and it's just like, wow, I can't believe you did that, you really suck, thanks for nothing. If it's that kind of message, you don't respond to that. There's no question in that. You don't need to say anything. Sometimes people are under a court order where they have to respond within maybe 24 or 48 hours. And if you're responding to that kind of message within that time frame, then you might be saying, okay, so what do I do if the court's, ordered me to respond to this, but there really isn't a question in it? Then I just have people say received. You don't need to say anything else. Yeah, I got your insult. Don't say that. Just say received. And that way you did respond. You acknowledge that you saw it and there wasn't any question asked of you. So there's really nothing to say. A lot of times we want to respond to that message from them and we want to give details of what's happened, or we want to, argue with them about how, we did what we did because of whatever reason and not just because we suck. And we want to give this explanation for it. So we want to fill in the details. And here's the problem with that. When you're dealing with a high conflict person, what I call that is giving them a hook. The more you try to explain why you're doing something, the more you try to explain how you feel about it, what brought you to that decision, all you're doing is giving them little bits and pieces of things that they can come back and argue with to suck you back into that argument emotionally. And that's what they're going to do. And so this is where the disengage becomes key, because if you're truly disengaging, then you're not writing back a bunch of details and a bunch of explanation or defending yourself or any of those things. And so what you want to do with a high conflict personality is shut the conversation down. That's always my number one goal. How do we solve the problem at hand, whatever that is? We need to pick up at a different time. Somebody's going to be late from work. The child has a homework project. Whatever we're talking about that we're trying to solve, we need to solve it and get out. Okay? You need to not linger there in that conversation. High conflict people, always you want to be shutting down the conversation with them, not trying to prolong it, trying to wrap it up. Those are kind of my keys. Again, a lot of those are things that overlap with gray rocking. And I think that gray rock is a great technique, but you can't just blanketly ignore messages either, or take some of the things to extreme to where the core is seeing you as not communicating or shutting down. So you got to find that balance in the communication. If you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. I would love to talk to you and talk about how some of my programs might be able to support you. I'll see you in the next video.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.